As somebody who's been in the activist space, I love having conversations with people that are amazing activists, and we've got a great activist right here on this network who's doing amazing work with the whole things that are going on with timeshares. She's got this great show that is, believe it or not, on a episode that is well above the 70. I think this is episode 72 or something like that, but it's Timeshare Solutions or Surrender. And of course, we've got Irene with us, and she is an amazing lady. So I'm going to bring Irene in, and she's going to bring in her guests. But definitely, it is always good to have great activists and great people that are doing amazing things right here on Pod TV. So, Irene, how are you doing? TARDA is doing great things. I just had to come in here and say hello and let you get started. But I'm going to turn it over to you because I know that you've got some great guests and some amazing conversation.
Thank you, Mark, for your support. And this is episode 72 for Timeshare and Resort Developer Accountability. And we have a full show today. We have a lot to talk about. So I'm going to get right to it. And I'm going to introduce our first guest, which is Michelangelo, one of my favorite names. And he is in God's country, Maine. Michelangelo, his parents have some challenging medical conditions that prevent traveling, and they're stuck with a resort that has no responsible exit, I believe. We also have Cheryl, who is battling 5 timeshares, and based on a prior positive experience with timeshares from a long time ago, she saw no need to worry about the end game of timeshare, but she's learned that it can be a real disaster. So we also have Julie. And we had one guest that had to schedule at the last minute. And I love our divine intervention producer that Julie called me out of the blue about a half hour before the show and said, I can make it. So that's wonderful. Last but not least, we have Undercover. No, just kidding. He's just having a little bit of trouble with his microphone. Jake, who is on our TARDA board with extensive HOA experience. So we call the resorts that are, Jake, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. He's out in California. So only 2 time zones today. That's a record. Now, I was really excited this week, and then I also was really angry this week. So I'm going to do a little bit of describing why. First of all, there was a New York Times article this week about a Tennessee timeshare. The title of the article was "My Timeshare is an Albatross. How do I get rid of it?" And an attorney responded saying it's worthless. And then the other, okay, great. We have Ryan. Are you here?
Yes. Hello.
Okay. We can't see your camera either, but that's okay if we can hear you. So Ryan, thanks for joining us today. I know you were tied up with something and said you were going to be a little bit late. Ryan is the only one with us today that has a loan. And Ryan recently retired, recently separated from service. Thank you for your service with the military, with the Navy, Ryan. And as I was explaining, we had the one article that said, why can't I sell my timeshare? And then the other article was Meadow Lake Development. And in that article, where similar to your situation, Michelangelo, there's no responsible exit. And AARP is quoted on that was an ABC news report. If you fill out a contact us on TARDA.org and would like to receive our monthly newsletter, we'll be putting these two links in the newsletter. In that article, AARP said there are 850,000 people they estimate have indicated they want to sell their timeshare within the next 2 years. So that would be a really big good luck. Now, before we start on the Michelangelo, Cheryl, and Julie that have no loans, they just want to be released from the timeshare. Ryan is, if there's one reason why I entered into this, I call it a ministry, Mark's calling it a activism, but people they're desperate, and there's no one more angry than an active duty service member that finds his security clearance in jeopardy because he bought a timeshare. So, Ryan, go ahead and let us know how you ended up in a timeshare presentation. And I believe you said you had stopped payments in January, but then had to make them up because you were trying to make a major purchase. So fill us in on how you ended up where you are today with your timeshare. And it's with Hilton, correct?
Sure. Yes, of course. My timeshares with Hilton Grand Vacations. It was in February of 2023. I was in call it transfer leave between duty stations. I just finished my schooling at the Naval Nuclear Prototype Training Unit in Charleston. I was getting ready to go to the fleet for the first time. I was contacted by Hilton Grand Vacations probably in January or February, and they offered me the 3-night, 4-day stay at one of a few select hotels. And before I'd go all the way to Guam and now not South America for, I don't know, probably at least a year before I'll be able to take leave. Yeah, I wanted to go see some of my friends. I had some friends in Florida, so I agreed to go to the presentation, talk to one of their sellers, Alvin Elkerson, and I guess he really convinced me it was a good idea. He really sold me the idea that I'd be able to use this really frequently on my deployments. And it's, on deployment, you have a port. You don't want to be sleeping on the boat when you're in port. You want to go sleep in a hotel in one of these foreign ports. And he really oversold me on how many hotels you can stay at. You can't just pull into Japan and stay at a hotel. I think there's only a handful of them in Japan. They're not just everywhere. When I did go and get ported in Japan, I went to stay at one of the things, and I was so excited to open the app, and the closest one was over 2 hours away. Yeah, and then I found that the availability and using it is extremely frustrating. I've actually never used it since the entire time I've purchased it. I've never used it. He told me it was going to be an appreciating asset, and I don't know. I think it's the worst purchase I've ever made.
What I was the most disturbed about is the 16 to 18% interest rate.
Yeah, it has an 18% interest rate, and he told me, don't you even worry about that. I was very concerned about that. I was like, it's a very high interest rate. He said, don't you even worry about that. Nobody keeps it. Everyone refinances it. I mean, I challenged anyone to go and find a single legitimate lender that's not going to laugh you in the face when you try to refinance a timeshare, because there's no value behind it. The only way they're going to accept the loan is if it's like a home line of credit.
Right. And we've had a number of complaints where the military are told that you can get a special interest rate or a discount because you're in the military. And Ryan, I'm going to remove you from the screen for just a minute because we've got some garbling here, and then I'll bring you back on. You're not garbling. That could be on our end. So we had somewhere we're told that you could get a special interest rate because you're in the military, and that's true, but you have to have the high interest rate loan before you go in the military, the Service Members Civil Relief Act. 5 developers, 1 was dismissed, but 4 developers, there's still some things going on, that have been sued, accused of violating the Military Lending Act. And the argument is whether, and this kind of affects everyone else on the show today. So the argument is a timeshare loan, a mortgage, or consumer credit? Because if it's a mortgage, then it affects your credit a lot more. Now, your grandmother's timeshare, like we own and you guys own, are deeded, and it's a fixed week, or even if it's a floating week, you get a deed. And so the argument with Westgate, in Steins versus Westgate, the Florida lower court ruled that, and Judge Dalton ended the day, when I check out of a timeshare, I can't leave my underwear and toothpaste, saying that it is not a mortgage loan. And the Military Lending Act exempts home mortgages. So you would think that would be the end of it. Westgate appealed. They went to the appellate court. Taya in the Army, our very first guest from February 2024, went with me. And Westgate lost at the appellate court. You have Fannie Mae that states on their website, a timeshare loan is not a mortgage loan. You have the National Credit Union Administration, NCUA, it's not a mortgage loan. But we still have Blue Green and Hilton that's saying, yes, our loans are not covered, are exempt from the Military Lending Act. So Ryan, I don't want to give up on your situation. We don't chase people. We promote self-advocacy. But active duty, so I know you're retired now, medically retired, but it's really hard to track down active duty service members. So I want to stick with it. And I will say that Hilton has been better than Wyndham and Westgate for working with people to resolve. So let's stick with you. And Brian, you're more than welcome to stay with us the rest of the time, but if you do have some things you're dealing with, feel free to leave the studio whenever you like. Okay? And then now, is there any way, now that you're retired, before I let you go, that you could make the best of it, that you could actually use this now that you're, because relying on foreign bookings is kind of difficult. So do you, is there any way that your family could use this?
Realistically, I don't think so. We have a dog and 2 cats, and there's none of the HGV places are pet friendly. So you'd have to find a separate place to like book the dogs. And then even still, I have like really chronic feet pain. It's really hard for me to like, I don't know. I don't think I would. Like, I don't know. I can't really go on hikes or anything. My foot pain is too bad. I don't think that I really can use it at all. I can't even use it for foreign travel anymore. I got married when I was in Guam, but my wife's a foreign national. She's here legally she's here legally. She has her work authorization, everything. She's not allowed to leave the United States. If she leaves the United States, she can't come back into the United States. So I can't use it at all, really abroad, if I want to bring my wife with me. And then I don't even, say again?
Did Hilton respond when you reached out to them?
When I reached out to the CEO.
Did you fill out a financial hardship form
I have not filled out a financial hardship
or
form.
you did
No,
not fill out a
I,
medical hardship?
I have not filled it out. I emailed the CEO. Actually, texted Alvin Elkerson, the guy who sold me the timeshare, and I told him I had some questions. And then about 2 weeks after I texted him, he responded to me. But I don't know. By that time, I just felt like the thing I asked him wasn't really gonna matter. This was earlier in the month, but
Okay, well, what we need to do is you need to reach out again and go into more detail about the medical hardship. Um, And let's talk about that later on then. And thank you so much for being on the show again. Thank you for your service. My dad was a Navy veteran. He enlisted at age 36 during World War II. So, okay, well, let's move on now. Let's start with Michelangelo. And I don't know where we're getting that garbling. Jake, I'm going to remove you for a minute. No, we still, okay, so I think it must be a Pod TV issue. We didn't have it before the show started, so we apologize for that. So Michelangelo, tell us your situation with Southwind Timeshare and how you reached this point that you're at right now, being stuck with it.
Sure. So they're my in-laws. They own 2 deeded weeks. And, I got involved because they're in perpetuity. So I'll end up with them when they pass away. And they're 74 and 85. He has muscular dystrophy and he's blinding. And she just got done with cancer treatment. So they're not traveling. Nobody in the family's used them for 3 years now. They paid maintenance fees up till this year. But after talking with Jake and them and some other stuff, they've decided to not pay moving forward. So
Yeah, that's a decision that you have to make.
yeah.
We can't, people ask us all the time, should I stop making payments? And we say to watch episode 11, it's an attorney talking about timeshare defaults. And Julie was as I said, she's the grandma of all of us with the amount of time that she spent trying to deal with this. And Jake on our board has helped her. So Julie, let's talk about, you own at Oakmont, also in Tennessee. And how long have you owned it? And when did you start attempting to be released from it? And how is it progressing?
I can't remember exactly how long I've owned it, but it was well over 25 years ago. And through a divorce, I ended up getting that timeshare in my name, and somehow they convinced me that I couldn't have my name only on there, so my son's name was added. Didn't use it. I found it very difficult to use. And time went by, and time went by, and time went by, and then just, and finally I thought I gotta make a move on trying to see what I can do to get out of this. And it's been 2 year and a half maybe that we started connecting, possibly closer to 2, but and kind of coach to like write some letters and find out if they had an exit plan, which they said they did, but they really don't. They just have a board where you can post your week and your ownership and try to sell it. And there's many names on this board, and I don't even know who looks at that board.
Did you list yours on there? Did you list yours
Yeah,
on there?
it is on there. So I said, well, who sees this board? And they said other timeshare owners who want to pick up another week. I thought, oh, okay. So Irene was coaching, and then hooked me up with Jake, and we have explored. My son wants nothing to do with it, and he was like unhappy that his name was on there. And to be honest, I didn't pay attention when I got the title. I just didn't. So I have been successful in kind of getting his name off, and just me being the sole owner as a first step to stepping out and maybe not paying maintenance fees at this point. Jake encouraged me to rent it to list it. I think we listed it in TUG, and I'm not sure if we listed it in Red Week or not. We talked about it. I think I have to go back in my notes and look that all over. But to rent it for a week made it look a little bit more desirable to anybody who's maybe trying to pick up a week in that area. So right now I have a week scheduled, and I may or may not be using that. I need to find out what my options are for that too. But I don't plan. I really, at this point, with my son's name off there, I don't plan to keep paying the maintenance fees. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm not probably going to make any major purchases for a while. Retired and like where I live and all that good stuff. So, you know, maybe it's time to just see what happens, so to speak, by not paying. And, you know, for some people, that's not a big hit to their credit. And like I say, with my name being the sole owner, I'm more likely to take that risk and see what happens. So yeah, so it's been a journey, and lots of information and good information from Irene and Jake, and the newsletters and these podcasts for sure.
Well, that's great. And the reason I asked Jake today, I mentioned before at the beginning of the show that I was very angry about a book that was released recently. I think if you tell people not to buy it, that's a sure way to get people to buy it. So I'm not even going to say the name of it. And I was excited about it because the author is not an exit company soliciting for business, you know, background in other areas of real estate. And I was so excited and up to the third chapter because she was promoting buying on the secondary market. Her family had some timeshares and the importance of the secondary market. But then I got to chapter 4, you know, how to be released from your timeshare. And she said, all you have to do is file a quitclaim deed, which you did, Julie, to remove your son from the timeshare. And that works fine. It's like selling your house. If I sell my house to a buyer, the person that built my house didn't have to approve it, but she's suggesting you do the quitclaim deed back to the resort. And on our July newsletter, we'll include the comments from an attorney that said that you could get away with that, but if the resort catches it, they'll just quitclaim it back to you. They can refuse it. And the other that I was even more horrified, and the reason I was so horrified is she mentioned a book that I wrote the foreword and I edited the book. And it was great. The first edition came out, and then with the second edition, we suspected some pretty shady dealings. And she actually, in her book, after mentioning that book, said that if you have a loan, like Ryan, you can transfer your timeshare to an LLC and then have the LLC file for bankruptcy. In the industry, those are known as Viking ships because the Vikings used to put their, oh my gosh, Kim is on here. I can't believe it. Kim is home recovering from surgery, and she probably has no business being with us right now, but it's a wonderful thing to see her face, even if she's not talking to us right now. But anyway, sending it to an LLC, filing for bankruptcy, and the Vikings put their dead on ships, sent them out to sea, set them on fire, and set them out to sea. That's what we call Viking ships. So Jake, can you weigh in on that strategy, both for people, the quitclaim deed if you have no loan, and then what this author said about the filing a fictitious LLC?
Right. So let's start with the quitclaim process. So generally doing a quitclaim for illegal purposes or for the purpose of cheating somebody out of money is illegal. So that's in the first place. People shouldn't do it just because they want to get out of an obligation when that obligation is a legal obligation. And second of all, the way the governing documents are written for most resorts that are deeded properties is you have to notify the resort upon a change of ownership, or a quit claim is a change of ownership or a potential change of ownership. And once you notify the resort, they know. It's not that they have to catch it. It's not that they have to get the county records all the time. Is that you're liable for all dues and special assessments. Any assessments, you're liable at the resort, unless you notify the resort of who the next person is, and that next person is willing to take the liability. So if you're changing the ownership back to the resort and you notify the resort will deny it. So it's really just changing the ownership and not going through and notifying the resort that you have changed the ownership will just, you'll continue receiving the bills and you'll still be liable legally for all the expenses. So that doesn't do anything for you. Now, the second idea of the Viking ships, there are very, very few Viking ships ideas in the industry. That was more prominent 10 to 15 years ago, until the attorney generals of every state went after some major operators that decided to start these Viking ships. And it was recognized by most attorney generals as illegal, and they went after the people that set up these Viking ships. So doing it as a one-time for yourself is an expensive proposition, because you have to set up the LLC, and then you may find the attorney general going after you once the resort realizes what you're doing. Any good resort operator would know that once you transfer something to a resort and you notify them, so that's the process of Viking ship, is basically changing, quit claiming the deed to an LLC that you or somebody else created, and then notifying the resort that you're no longer the owner of that week. Well, you do it once, but then the second time you try it, that resort knows that you have no intention of paying, that LLC has no intention of paying dues. And the industry itself has mechanisms by which they track these Viking ships. So once they get to 2 or 3 deeds or 4 deeds, it raises a flag, because these Viking ships don't pay dues. And they also would transfer maybe 5 to 10 deeds within 2 or 3 months. So they immediately raise a flag, and then the operators of the resort say, sorry, we can deny, and they do deny transfers to LLCs that do not intend to pay dues and never pay dues. And I think it's interesting that, in one particular case that I was involved in, the LLC was created by a Florida lawyer. And we immediately, the resort that I was working with, we immediately identified that particular situation where it was acting like a Viking ship. It has never paid dues before anywhere, and yet it owned a number of units. And the first letter that we sent them, we asked them to appear in person in front of the board and explain to us how the manager of the LLC intends to use these units. And at that point, it became clear both to the lawyer, that was creating these Viking ships, and to us that no more transfers will be allowed. So it's not, it's, it sounds good on paper, but when you try to do it, you're going to spend a lot of money creating the LLC, and then you'll find that there is, aside from the government going after you, the resorts now are very smart about identifying Viking ship situations.
And Kim just asked a question, how can a quitclaim deed work on a timeshare? And as the attorney that I said we'll include in our newsletter this week said that if, say, Michelangelo does find a neighbor that would want it, then he could do a quitclaim deed with your neighbor, but that's different than doing a quitclaim deed back to the resort, correct?
That's correct. So that's correct. However, I, from my dealings with title companies, and it's, I would say that there are some companies, even in the timeshare business, that say if you'd like to transfer ownership, use a quitclaim. A quitclaim is not as good and can muddy the title as compared to a grand deed or so I definitely recommend that if you find somebody that wants to take over your ownership, then give them a grand deed to the resort, which will make it good for the person that receives it. Otherwise, the title to that deed is going to get muddied, because a quitclaim is only a promise to transfer whatever the ownership is, and if it doesn't exist, then it's not a crime. So when you receive, on the receiving side, if you receive a quitclaim, I can, for example, I can claim you the Washington Bridge, and that doesn't mean that you own the Washington Bridge, but the county will record it, and nobody's going to really care. So in other words, it's a document without really much meaning. The resorts will take it, and they'll be happy to get somebody else owning that property and paying dues on it, but it does cloud the title in the long run.
Well, and you're waking up deeply buried memories of my pre-licensed real estate course. I believe there's 3 or 5 different kinds of deeds, and the quitclaim deed has the least protection for the buyer. What was the for the houses we live in, what is the type of deed that we usually deal with when we're dealing with our residential properties?
So in California, at least, it's common, especially between residential owners, to do a grant deed.
A grant deed.
Right.
Okay, great. And how many years experience do you have? I know you served on as an HOA president and as a treasurer. How many years experience do you have with HOAs?
Oh, about 35 years of experience with HOAs.
Only 35 years of experience.
And so things have changed over the years, and I still learn every day. I learn something new about timeshares and how they operate. I wanted to comment a little bit on Michelangelo's situation, and just in general about this idea of not paying dues, which I do not generally support, not paying dues. But I want to cover it from the resort side of view, so you know what the other side is thinking. So when you pay your dues, you're basically compliant with the resort, and you can make a reservation. Once you stop paying your dues, you're no longer compliant, and you don't get a reservation. When you're paying your dues and you start negotiating and talking to the resort that you're paying dues to, it is the board of directors generally, or the board of directors have instructed the management company to handle these requests for relief in a certain way. And you have to find out that process from the board of directors. What is their process for releasing people from their obligation, from the deed? And whether it's through a deed back situation, extreme situation, whether they like to do foreclosures. I know one company that prefers to do foreclosures because in a foreclosure they get a very clear title to the property compared to just a deed back from the owner, where they may not be able to understand all the transfers that have happened to that property over the years, especially when the resort is 20, 30, 40 years old. So you have to see, what is it that the resort wants and how they want to process this transfer. And some of them say, we don't take anything back. And that's a valid argument for them, because they are a homeowner association, and typically if you live in a homeowner association in any state, you don't expect a homeowner association to take your unit from you. You'd still have to find a buyer or somebody else to take it over, even if it's worthless. Otherwise you get stuck with the obligations. So that's and I wanted to cover that as when you are compliant, when you are paying your dues. When you are paying your dues, you have a direct conversation with the board of directors. Your governing documents probably specify a process by which you can actually have a hearing in front of the board and explain your hardship, whether it's financial hardship, health hardship, whatever hardship you have, can't travel anymore. When you cross that border and become delinquent on your dues, the resort is obligated to handle your case according to a policy. That policy has to be written in such a way that it doesn't discriminate against you. So they can't just pick on you and say, Michelangelo is a millionaire, he can afford this, we're going to hire a lawyer. But then James, well, we know he already declared bankruptcy, so he can't, there's no reason to go after him. They can't do that. They can't make that determination. They have to handle everybody equally. So they have to have a process. So then after you become delinquent, they just have to follow their process for delinquency. And eventually what's happening now, for example, we're talking to a number of people, eventually if it goes into into a collections company, where the resort says, through their process, through their legal process of delinquencies, they send all their accounts to collections. And then they pretty much, in the collections process, they pretty much give the collections the right, exclusive rights to collect from you on that debt. And they cannot, on very exceptional cases, they can take an account back from collections. But once the resort decides to hire a collections company and give them their accounts, their delinquent accounts, then the collection company spends a certain amount of money to start collecting. They do a check on you. They try to figure out who you are, where you live, to give you the official notices that they have to go through, that's regulated by the state where you reside. That process is expensive, and therefore they don't want the resort dealing with you directly and grabbing that account back and saying, oh no, we're just going to handle it with our own process. So even when the collections company eventually is allowed by the resort to take the deed back in return for a certain payment. Even then, it's the collection company that does it. It doesn't send you back to the resort. So the account is basically assigned to collections, and it's very hard for the resort to get it back because the collections company is doing their legal process, which doesn't allow for many variations.
Well, and each state has a statute of limitations on debt. Either from what I've seen, 4 to 6 years that the collection people can have only 4 to 6 years to sue you on the debt, but they can continue to pursue it after that. One thing if you're unfortunate enough to own a Vacation Village timeshare, Vacation Village has been acquired by Vacatia, I can never say it, Vacatia, and in this ABC News report, that the family can't travel, similar to Michelangelo's situation, and at the very end of the report, they mention Vacatia. So they are a rental and a resale platform, so they can happily rent out dead inventory and never foreclose, hoping that you die and your kids won't know that all states have laws that allow you to disclaim the inheritance. Do I have that right, Jake?
Yes, but I think I'd like to add one thing. Even when you're not delinquent, most associations will allow you to put your unit in a rental pool, and they will rent it for you. They will probably take 30% of the rental fee, and most owners are dissatisfied with that rental program because they do not recoup the full amount of the rental. And so, but that's kind of a general for in case of Michelangelo's case, since he owns a specific week of the year. If that specific week of the year is very desirable, then he may be able, putting it in the rental pool with the developer or with the association, he may be able to recoup the costs of the dues for that unit. So it is true that after the unit is delinquent, the resort or the operator puts that unit up for rent to recover rents. In the last statistic that came from TARDA on the 2024 report, it looks like resorts are increasing their income annually from rentals, and these are rentals most of the time of units that are delinquent. Some states have laws that say that if you do rent, if the resort does rent out that space, that the owner gets that money, or gets money minus their cost of renting.
But if they stop paying maintenance fees, then they lose their rights, don't they?
Exactly, they do.
Okay.
Well, actually, no, not exactly. So if the unit is rented for more than the dues, some states will have laws that say that that money goes back to the resort to recoup the dues, and then what there is left over has to go to the owner, even if the owner is delinquent. So it's state by state, and it's something that with deeded property, it's something that was there in place in the last 10 years or so. Very few resorts are actually selling, or very few operators are selling deeded property. And that's one of the reasons, is because there's a lot more, once you own a deed, there's a lot more state restrictions on what you can do with the money when somebody owns a specific week in a specific unit, and then the resort rents it out and the person is not getting it. If you have a deed, it's really your money.
Before we have you answer Kim's question, can you, to some resorts oversell weeks? Cheryl, you have 5. Let's go through them. Well, first of all, you had a great experience in the past, and you were able to be released from some timeshares many years ago. So you had no problem buying 5 more on the secondary market or taking. I don't know if you paid anything for them. So explain to us how you ended up with 5 timeshares and why. Oh, Cheryl, you're muted. We lost Cheryl's.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I think I had to press a button. My story's, I'm proud of the past 40 years. I'm embarrassed about the past 2. My timeshare experience started in 1980. My father, I was in Massachusetts, and my father, timeshares came out around 1975. I've even sold them for Blue Green for about 3 months about 10 years ago, but it was so unethical I couldn't do it anymore. Anyway, so my father bought a timeshare in Cape Cod, which is the end of Massachusetts, and it hadn't even been built, and it was 1980, and it was about $2,000. And everybody said you were nuts. And I was a banker at the time, a new banker, because I was just out of college. And I said, brilliant. He bought at the Cove in Yarmouth, and that is still in my family. My niece inherited it, and it was a great decision. When I was in my mid-30s, my father had passed away, and my mother had the timeshare, and she was accruing all these weeks, and I wanted to go to Hawaii. I was married at the time, so we went to Hawaii for 3 weeks, and I went to the Bay Club at Waikoloa Beach on the Big Island. I didn't go to a sales presentation, never been to one. I've done them. So I walked into the sales office and I said, I want to buy here. Because that was around 94, 92, 94, around there. And back then, timeshares were selling, especially Hawaii, because you've got low supply and high demand.
And I'll interject here, Cheryl, that I was working 20 minutes from the Bay Club. And as a stockbroker, I would go from timeshare resort to timeshare resort, enrolling them in stock accounts, or a lot of them back then were independent contractors, retirement plans. So, and they were good people back then. Not like what I'm seeing now. And that's a great resort.
Amazing.
So how long did you own at the Bay Club?
20 years. And it was the best thing I ever did. I traveled all over, I wouldn't say the world, but England, Italy, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. I could go on and on and on and on. And I loved it. I got an MBA. I had 2 big careers that I hit 100,000. Well, in 2007, I lost my $100,000 job. I was working for an Indian chief. And he ran for office and lost. And that's when the economy started tanking in 2008. And I never got a good job back again, thus the bankruptcy. And I was still current on my Hawaii timeshare because I did not want to lose my Hawaii timeshare. But the court took it because they figured it was worth about $10,000 back then. So the court took it. And I didn't even have that much debt. I didn't own a house, whatever. So the court took it, and I was brokenhearted. So years went by, and I didn't have a timeshare. And then I did go on eBay, and I found the Bay Club about 3-4 years ago, and it was like $1. So I went back to the Bay Club, and then the maintenance fees were like $1,500, and then I decided I didn't want to do it. They took it back. No questions asked. Signed the deed. They took it back. In the meantime, I met this woman named Linda Skidmore. I can't remember how I met her. I think it was on some sort of Facebook site. Well, she was some sort of broker that she would charge people to take their timeshares that they didn't want, like a lot of money, like $1,500, $2,000. and she would try to unload them. And she worked full time, and she had a guy working for her. Well, he quit. So she had like pages, spreadsheets of hundreds of timeshares she was trying to get rid of for free, you know? So like I said, I've never been to a sales presentation, but for Blue Green, I gave them. And again, it was so unethical. I couldn't do it. But you made a lot of money. I'll tell you.
What sales center did you work at?
What?
What sales center did you work at with Blue Green?
I worked at the Tradewinds Resort in St. Petersburg.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There was about a dozen employees there that filed a lawsuit. Said they refused to do unethical sales practices. And Kim asked, why do you think their sales ethics changed? I think, Jake, I don't know if you would agree that timeshare's always been a little bit shady. We too bought, my husband and I, in 1980. You get your annual meeting notice and throw it away. This one said, please attend the annual meeting or your timeshare will be auctioned off at 3:00 on Tuesday at the sheriff's steps. It was flooded. Everybody turned out for the meeting. And it turned out the lawyer took a scroll like Moses and it went down. They had to move it to a church. We were in the rafters, and he said the timeshare was owned by the mafia. And the mafia didn't pay the debt to build it, and so they were going to foreclose. And Jim Marshall of Marshall, Missouri, was an owner, and he's a state representative, and he stepped in and saved Holiday Shores in Missouri. So, but I think, Jake, don't you think it's just greed? That I've talked to two lawyers that said the non-disclosure clause, oral representation, non-reliance clause should not be in timeshare contracts. But there's so many bad apples selling, and they know that they can say anything under the sun and be told it only matters what is in the contract. Would you agree with that, Jake?
Yes, when the incentive is to cheat and lie, then the salespeople cheat and lie. It depends on what the upper management sets up for the incentives. If there was an incentive that said, the owner has to be satisfied for 10 years, or we can claw back the commission, then you'd have a completely different industry. So there's many ways to handle it. I don't think the salespeople are doing when it's so prevalent in the industry, they can't be just doing it on their own. They have to be coached to do that. So I completely agree with you, and I think the problem is in management and hire, as far as hiring the company, as far as the process that is used that seems so unfair to most people.
And Cyril, you have, let's go over these 5 timeshares and what the status is. One of them is Attitash Mountain Village in New Hampshire.
Yes.
I bet it's a beautiful location. Have you ever been there?
Oh yeah, I grew up in New England, so I spent a lot of time in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. I've been to Attitash several times. I know Attitash well.
And at the timeshare?
Yeah.
You stayed.
Well, yes, I traded my Hawaii week and I went to Attitash.
Okay, and so
I also been there skiing over the winters, because you just rented a room. I'd go with friends for a weekend, so I spent a lot. I knew Attitash very well.
now,
But I just want to go back to Blue Green for 1 minute on sales
sure.
presentations.
Yeah.
It depends on management. Does encourage you to lie and whatever. What was in my favor, and that's why they really wanted me and hired me, is I had 20 years of the Bay Club already, and my sales presentation, and it was the truth, is that I loved the Bay Club, and it was the best thing I ever did. So that was my sales pitch, and that was a very strong sales pitch, but it was honest, but anyway. So
I thought Wyndham bought Trend West.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the lawsuit was, I'll have to check back on it. I checked on Red Week and there were 18 listings. Now, there's no comps in timeshare resales like there would be in residential. So when somebody posts a week for 17,000, pretty much a pipe dream, but there are like 4,000 to 5,000. There were 18 listings, and there were several between 1,000 and 5,000. Now, did they were willing to take your week back if you had? Okay, but you just, because of the medical struggles you had, you just couldn't afford.
Well, it was. I met this Linda Skidmore, and at the time I was living in Tampa, Florida, and I was renting. And I was renting so I could travel a lot. And the rent was real cheap in Florida for a long time. And then, I was paying like $700 for a 1-bedroom. So I had plenty of money to travel, even though I was on Social Security. Well, then I got in 2 car accidents. I got T-boned twice in 14 months. Nobody spoke English. I got back injuries. Shortly after that, I took my timeshare and I went to Portugal. Well, my back gave out and I got what's called drop foot syndrome. So you can't feel or use your right foot or toes at all. You have to go on crutches. So that was from flying. So I was told by my doctor, I encourage you to never fly again. So, and this was after I had taken the 5 from Linda Skidmore. Bay Club wasn't Linda. Bay Club was eBay. And 1 other wasn't Linda. I think 4 were Linda, but they were all just given to me. The maintenance fees were current. So my rent doubled, number 1. So my rent went, it did not the same year, a couple of years. It took a couple of years. It went from $700 to $1,500. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. So my plan had been to travel a lot, stay in my 1-bedroom for $700 and just travel a lot. Well, after the back injury, I can't travel a lot. I can't drive long distances. You can't tell by looking at me. I can walk, I can bend over, I can do things, but I can't sit for long periods of times. So the plan was I was just going to travel a lot. But when the car accidents happened, I couldn't travel. So that's when I decided I bought a house and in South Carolina, because it's very cheap here compared to Florida. It's about a fifth of the cost. And I just can't travel. So that's why I've been trying to get rid of them. And I've sent hardship letters.
If you have 5 timeshares and 4 of them have no responsible exit, it really doesn't make sense to pay the maintenance fees on the 5th one. That will take
I
it back.
I haven't paid it on anyone, but I haven't gotten any collection letters, and only 1 went to my credit report, but they didn't send me to collections. So I am going to file a complaint with the credit bureau saying, they should have sent me to collections and maybe something could have been negotiated. But it's going to be real hard to pay for something that I've never used.
Do you know which resort went to collections?
Yes. They're the nastiest ones. The Beach Club. The Beach Club number 3 at North Carolina. They were
a place at the beach.
They'll let me out. Yeah, place at the beach. They'll let me out for 3 years maintenance fee, which is about $3,500.
And there's on Red Week, there is no resales listed on Red Week. And we're starting to run out of time. We have Endless Mountain Resort in the Poconos.
Yep.
No resales are listed. We have a number of people reach out about Poconos. And then we have the worst of the worst, in my opinion, is Great Eastern that will not take a timeshare back under any circumstances. Michelangelo, just like you shared. And then finally, we have a minute and a half left. We have the Cliffs at Peace Canyon. That unfortunately is Vacation Village. So again, Vacatia can rent it out for the eternity. And so we're running out of time, but Jake, I want to thank you for adding your expertise to have both sides of the equation from all of us that have been owners, and then to have you being on the receiving end.
Thanks.
And Mark, I don't know if you've been listening to us or not.
I've been listening to you. I've been listening, very enriching and in-depth conversation, and y'all are definitely pointing out some of the scares that are going on there in the timeshare business and all along those lines. I do have, because I sometimes have to come in with a lighthearted question, and I do have to ask one question before we get ready to end this show, and all along these lines, because as you noted, Michelangelo has that name. It is a very famous name. So I just want to know, does he have any Michelangelo paintings, whether they're prints or not, that he owns and everything along those lines? Because like, you've got your name, it's Michelangelo. You're supposed to have a Michelangelo painting, even if it's only a print.
I will get one just for you.
All right.
Yeah, and Michener's book about Michelangelo was, I think it was Michener, that I know it was one of those 3-inch jobbers. So, well, and Mark, thank you so much for pulling the weight for Kim. We should have a few questions we haven't answered. So we'll, maybe we can talk Jake to be back about overselling. Can they oversell? And is it legal to buy on eBay for $1? We'll continue that conversation on a show going forward. Thanks
Sounds
to
good.
everybody.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get the end stream and we'll get ready to end this show.